All right, we have our devices rolling. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Citizens Oversight Committee for the City of Morro Bay, acting as the Citizens Finance Advisory Committee. It's Tuesday, August 17th, 2021, and the time is 3:02 p.m. So we call this meeting to order, and please do roll call, Sarah.
Certainly. Member Alexander? Here. Member Beckman?
Present.
Member Johnson?
Lois, you're muted.
Sorry. Yes, present.
Member Peck? Absent. Member Weiner?
Present.
Vice Chair Spagnola?
Present.
And Chair Martin.
Present. Thank you. Okay, so we will go on to committee member announcements and presentations. Does anyone have anything? It's been a few months since we've met. Any news? I don't see anybody unmuting, so I guess there is none. Okay, we'll move on then. Public comment period. This is the period for any members of the public to comment on anything on the agenda or within the subject matter jurisdiction of this committee. If it is relating to something on the agenda, you can comment at that time, or if you can't wait until that time, you can make those comments now. So do we have any members of the public who would like to make comments at this time?
We do not have any raised hands in the queue at this moment.
Okay, thank you. Well, there will be opportunity under specific items, and hopefully I will remember to request public comment as those things come up. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is item A1, approval of the minutes from the April 21st, 2021 meeting. Are there any changes or corrections to that? And if not, then we'll entertain a motion to approve.
John, I'll move to approve as submitted.
Okay, thank you, Barbara.
Second.
Second, Homer, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All 6 in favor, 1 absent. Okay, item A2, approval of the minutes for the May 18th, 2021 committee meeting. Are there any corrections or adjustments to that? Okay, seeing none, can we have a motion, please?
That's fine. I'll do it again, same.
Okay,
Submitted.
thank you. And Homer, was that you seconding?
Yeah, sort of, yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, the motion passes 6 in favor and 1 absent. So the business items, item B1 is a brief update from the Assistant City Manager / Admin Services Director. And I would like to welcome Sarah Johnson-Rios. This is your first meeting. Appreciate you taking this job. And welcome to this committee. Hopefully you see a lot of friendly faces here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair Martin and commissioners. And it was a pleasure to get to meet with each of you and hear a little bit about CFAC's work from your perspective. And I look forward to working with all of you. I will do a very brief introduction of myself and my role, and then give you a quick update on what's been going on with the Admin Services Department, which is finance and IT. So I'm Sarah Johnson-Rios. I have about 14 years experience in local government. About 13 of those years have been in cities in California, and I'm thrilled to be joining the City of Morro Bay. Had a variety of roles, including finance and also assistant city manager most recently for the City of Paso Robles. Roles working on large capital improvement budgets and a number of things that I think will be will make a good partnership for the City of Morro Bay. So really excited again to support CFAC and your valuable work, and thank you for all of the time that you dedicate to ensuring the fiscal sustainability and success of the City of Morro Bay. So some brief updates. What's been going on recently here is in the finance world, we have been finalizing the fiscal year 2021 adopted budget, which was approved by the City Council on June 22nd. And so we are putting together the final changes to the budget book. There are some minor corrections that we've encountered that you'll see on the City Council agenda next week. And then the adopted budget will be posted after that. And then we are brainstorming on the best ways to do a budget at a glance type of communications. I know that's been a priority for CFAC in the past. Not sure exactly what format that we'll take this year with some of our staffing changes. We've been a little slower, but that is still on our radar and making sure we're communicating the high-level themes of the budget to the community. We are beginning our year-end close process, and so I know you all will be reviewing the audit when we get much farther along, but we're starting the year-end close process now. And I'm very excited to report that we do have recruitments underway. We actually are hiring a permanent finance manager, and that person will be starting mid-September. And so that's really a critical role for the team and to be able to deliver a lot of the work product that I know CFAC oversees, provides oversight for. So really excited to have that person starting. And then we're also in the middle of the recruitment for the Senior Administrative Services Analyst position, which will be some support on the finance side and then also on broader citywide policies and process improvements, one-time projects, and a number of different ideas or projects are already on that person's list for when they arrive. So that's exciting. And then I did get a question that from a CFAC member that's not on the agenda, but I do want to provide information on that. So this is a little bit unrelated, but it's regarding our cannabis revenues. We are still on track for the budgeted level of cannabis revenues for 21-22. Obviously, we're still very early in the fiscal year, but based on the most recent monthly remittances of cannabis taxes, we are still on track for that $480,000 budget number. And then I do want to provide a more general announcement to the community about I'm going to share my screen with you. Go ahead and share my screen and then, let's see. A community forum that will be held. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So a community forum that will be held to discuss the power plant stacks and provide some facts and figures to the community. That will be held on Wednesday, September 8th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. And it will be a Zoom meeting. So you can see on the screen, the link to the Zoom meeting will be the same as it is for the other city council and public meetings, and that information is available for the public on the city's website. So you can go to the city's website and find the specific Zoom link. Again, September 8th at 6 p.m. And we will have a number of different presenters there to provide information to the community about the stacks, the current condition of the stacks, and considerations for the future of the stacks. And so really encouraging the community to get get engaged in that conversation. And we actually do have both Scott Collins and Don Maruska on the meeting today to answer any questions if you have any about that forum. And with that, I will close my opening remarks and take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Sarah. Does anyone have questions for Sarah?
Yeah, I guess the stack thing is interesting. There are those in the community who I believe think that there may be some sort of vote. The agenda that you have here doesn't even come close to alluding to that. It's literally seemingly talking about the facts. This is the way it is. Is that valid? In other words, this will not come up for a vote, I presume. Is that a good assumption?
For a public vote?
There are those, right or wrong, there are those in the community who think that the public should have some input as to whether or not the stack should stay or go.
Sure. I'm going to turn that. I see that Don Maruska has been promoted and Scott Collins as well. So I'm going to turn that over to Scott Collins.
Yeah, good question, Committee Member Beckman. The council ultimately has the authority to tell Vistra either to make it part of the tear down or to leave them up. The goal of this outreach is just to help inform the discussion that's going on in the community and help inform it with the best information we have available through the experts who actually understand this stuff. So that's the intent of that, and hopefully get some more engagement and questions from the community answered at that meeting. And there may be subsequent forums after this one before council ultimately makes a decision, which according to our MOU with Vistra, we need to notify them by the end of calendar year 2022. At this point, there's no public vote. To answer that specific question, there's no public vote at this point set up to make that decision.
Thank you, Scott. Any other questions for Sarah? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Sarah. We'll move on to the next item, which is the City Council Goals and Objectives Update and receipt of CFAC input for the upcoming goals and objectives setting process. So, Sarah, I know that Scott's here to address this as well, but we'll start with you and then you can take it how you want. Thank you.
Sure, I am just going to hand it over to Mr. Collins for this item. I have been advised by our city clerk that for the business items, we should be technically taking roll call votes. I know it's a little unusual perhaps for the director update, but if we want to get in the practice of doing roll call votes for the business items, that is our clerk's recommendation.
Okay, but there actually isn't an action on B1, right?
Right. We can do that, I guess, for and most of these are receiving.
If it's just a report, just a report, then we don't. But I guess for the minutes, we should have taken a roll call.
Yeah, we can. I think it's a best practice. We can do that going forward, and I'll work on clarifying the agenda for action items and non-action items. Perhaps for starting with the business item number 2, if you'd like to go back and take a roll call vote for minutes, we can certainly do that as well.
Okay, well, whatever you feel most comfortable with, we can certainly do that. So you want to do that now?
Sure.
Okay.
And may I recommend if you'd like to do perhaps a joint motion for both?
Okay. So do we have a motion for both of the minutes? We had Barbara and Homer were motion and second. Do you want to do that again?
Sure, John. I will move that we approve the minutes from April 20th, 2021 and May 18th, 2021 as submitted.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, Sarah?
Great. So Commissioner Alexander,
Yes.
Commissioner Beckman,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
and Commissioner Peck is absent. Commissioner Weiner,
Yes.
Vice Chair Spagnola,
Yes.
and Chair Martin.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
I will hand it back over for business item number 2 to Mr. Collins for that presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Chair Martin and commissioners. So I'm going to try to give a brief presentation here. I know you've all read the report and already offered some good questions and feedback since the time it was published. But just to highlight the process in which we go through every couple of years and then talk about the items that goal items and action items that are specific to this committee and to the Administrative Services Department. So the city has been working on a goals process since approximately 2015-16 timeframe. We have narrowed council has narrowed the focus down to 4 key goal areas over the stretch of the last couple of years, and expanded recently to 5 with the COVID-19 response. But the way the process works is every January, typically following an election, City Council seeks input from the community, including from the advisory boards and commissions, to provide input back to the council to ensure that our goals align with the current reality in the community and what the needs, values, and goals are. We try to do that every couple of years so that we don't lose touch, and also provides an opportunity for the organization to sort of rally around core focus areas, and that our budget relates back to those goals. And then we do our best to try to engender and get action items under our belt to help achieve those goals. We usually hold a community forum, typically a few months later in the year, where council then has to grapple with the input from the community and the various boards and commissions, and revise, reform, or throw out and start over again with the high level goals and then the corresponding action items to achieve those goals. As stated right now, we have the 4 major goals plus the 1 temporary. They are to 1, achieve economic and fiscal sustainability. Council has identified that as a standalone top priority goal. And then the others to follow of equal status are to improve infrastructure and public spaces, complete updates to our land use plans and address affordable housing, to improve communication and engagement with the community. And the 5th added goal earlier this year was a temporary goal for the pandemic response. Like I said, we typically try to get this work done in the beginning of the year so that we have the remainder of that year and the next calendar year to get work done before the next election cycle. But this year has been just like with everything, it's been unlike any other year prior. And we put off the goals process to the mid-year just so we could focus on the pandemic response. Clearly, we thought we were coming out of it, and it appears we're heading right back into another surge. So seemingly all bets are off, but we are in the middle of the current goals process, and we've received input from every advisory board, save this one. And we've had a survey out online on our poll call tool where we've received over 100 responses so far. And the goal is to take that input to City Council on the 24th of August, just to present them with what we've heard in summary format from the various boards, commissions, and the community. And then later in September, they, as a council, will work to refine the goals and the action items for the next remainder of this calendar year and all next year. So as far as the progress on the current goals and action items, I believe you received an Excel file that as an attachment that shows kind of in a grid format what the action items are we're working towards and how we've done in terms of achieving those and those that we still have work to do on. But a lot of them do pertain to our financial situation, of course. So I'm not going to review all of them, but you do have that worksheet. But you can see we have made strides in many of them despite some of the challenges with COVID, and we still have work to do on a number of other items. But as it relates to this committee, we definitely want to get your input. And we had some initial discussions, I think, earlier this year, just about maybe a list of 5 to 10 items that are seemingly very important and outstanding that the city may benefit by pursuing. So I want to make sure I get to those. But before we do that, I just want to put out one reminder that, of course, everything we do is important, and we can do many things, but we can't do all things. And so we need to make sure that the items we choose to work on reflect the needs and desires of the community, and also make sure they're achievable given our existing resources, both staffing and revenues. So as far as the current action items, and when I define action items, those are really initiatives that help drive the goals. It's not necessarily our day-to-day work that we do. It's some of the higher level stuff that we do. But as it relates to CFAC and the administrative services and finance staff, some of the key items that we're still working on from the past couple of years is completing the impact fee analysis and updating. And then somewhat related to that is the cost allocation plan update, really starting to get into the nitty-gritty on a multi-year capital improvement budget and financing strategy. And I think we're all aware that we have a lot of needs in our community and that we need to have a good strategy in place, both one that assesses what our needs are, prioritizes those needs, and then the other side of the house, equally important, is how do we finance to get those things done. And last but not least is additional opportunities to address our CalPERS and OPEB unfunded liabilities. So those are the four that we've sort of identified that really, I think, a lot of ways relate back to the list that was shared, I think, from Chair Martin back in April, that discuss, Measure E, Q revenues, our harbor department, needs, particularly on the capital side, infrastructure planning, impact fee updates, paid parking feasibility, trying to come up with a 10 to 20-year plan for capital projects funding, revenue enhancements, OPEB, and CalPERS liabilities. I think the four identified before sort of address and hit on most of those. So really trying to find a way that we can get at a lot of these important questions in an efficient way. So what we've asked in the staff report of CFAC is to comment on the current city goals. And as a quick reminder, those four goals are: 1, to achieve economic fiscal sustainability; 2, improve public infrastructure and spaces; 3, update our land use plans and address affordable housing; and 4, improve communication and engagement with the community. Plus the add-on with COVID, are those 4 plus the 1 the right goals to work on? And if not, what should we be pursuing instead? Or should we refine those? And then the next question is, are those action items, the 4 that I identified, not 5, my apologies for the typo, those 4, are they the right ones to help get at that important goal? Or are there others that really are outside of those that we haven't considered? And so, again, in answering those questions, we definitely want to keep in mind the available staff and resources. We want to hone in on those key areas that are going to get the biggest bang for our buck, knowing that we don't have unlimited staff and resources. So appreciate any input we can get from this committee. A lot of you spent a lot of time thinking about what our needs are and have had great discussions in the past. And so I look forward to hearing from you all on what we should do as a city moving forward. Happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Well, let's take those one at a time. So the first in regards to the city goals, are there any members of the committee who feel that the city goals are not adequate or have some issue with the city goals?
I just have a question. I submitted some comments that since they weren't an action item, they weren't included. They happen to be literally identical to the comments that Steve Peck sent to all of us. Did I hear you, Scott, correctly that you said that a subset of the fiscal responsibility goal is to develop a long-term capital funding plan?
That's what and it hasn't been stated, a great question, by the way. It hasn't been stated definitively by council, but it's been stated indirectly numerous times through the development of the current budget we're in and in the lead up to Measure E that we know we have extensive capital needs. And so that was sort of on my mind when I made the decisions to hire the new assistant city manager and the public works director, and that, we start thinking about how all these pieces come together. So while it hasn't been stated directly as an action item, that would be our anticipation that we would take. We would recommend something along those lines for City Council under the goal of economic and fiscal sustainability, but also falling under improving public infrastructure and public spaces.
Can I comment, John?
Yes, Homer, go ahead.
Before, in my opinion, developing a capital budget is putting the cart before the horse. I believe that before a capital budget can be developed, the city needs to engage an engineering firm to do a comprehensive analysis of the capital projects needed for the next 20 years, similar to the One Water Plan. One Water Plan had over 100 separate projects with detailed cost estimates. A comprehensive 20-year plan for the rest of the city would probably be more expensive than the $700,000 plus that was spent on the One Water Plan. However, I don't understand how you could develop a budget without knowing how much money you need before you start planning how you're going to raise the money.
I think it's a matter of sequencing. I think both you and Bart are right. I mean, we want to be able to do all those things. I think there's a sequencing that needs to occur, but we need to think comprehensively. And so council did set aside funds for this fiscal year to do an assessment. It's definitely not that $700,000 mark, but it's a start to really start getting a better idea than just sort of the back napkin understanding we have. So that would be the intent, is to start to put those pieces together. But ultimately it is to build a transparent and well understood capital budget for this committee and for the community and City Council.
Homer, that concludes your questions. Okay, anybody else?
Just to make sure that we're clear, I would probably take exception to Homer because I think there is a fairly good delineation of a large percentage of the necessary capital projects, water and sewer through One Water Plan. There is a list of items for stormwater, the Highway 41-1 intersections identified, and to some extent, some other ones. The demolition has not been estimated for the WRF, but generally it's there. But the other part, he was saying to develop a budget. The issue that I've had is not the budget per se, because I think we do have some of that, but it's how are we going to fund it? I think Scott said that's part of what he's doing, but I just want to make sure that it's yes, we need the budget in whatever sequence, and how are we going to actually pay for that?
Can I respond? In the last budget, the 2 budgets ago, in the capital improvement section, there was maybe a dozen projects non-related to water, sewer, storm drains listed. But as an example, none of those projects mentioned any of the city buildings. And some of the city buildings are getting to the end of their useful life. There's just so many things that need to be done. I mean, if you walk around, Bart, you notice that the cities, a lot of areas, the city's out of compliance with ADA. That needs to probably somewhere along the line get back and get into compliance, things of that nature. And that's why I think it's much bigger than the few things that you mentioned, and that there needs to be a plan to identify those things and some idea of how much it might cost to fix them.
Scott, to what degree does the city's general plan address those things that Homer's talking about?
Well, that's a great question. I wish I had Scott Graham here to answer that. But it does sort of delineate all the areas in which we, the things we need to explore and the plans upon plans, whether it's waterfront or downtown, the Rock parking lot, all those things are sort of called out, but it doesn't necessarily say how you're going to do it or how you're going to pay for it, right? It just sort of identifies the kaleidoscope of issues, but it's more of a, long-term, these things should be done, but it doesn't tell you how to do it. So I think that's what phase we're in now. But it would definitely should and will connect to the general plan.
I have a comment, John. If I
Okay,
may.
well, let's go.
I kind of agree with both of them in a way, but my experience is, you can have a huge list, and there is a huge list, and you can try to figure out how much each project will cost, but the list is too long, and by the time you get a little ways down the list has changed and the priorities have changed. So you can spend money trying to figure out how much it's going to cost to do projects that are unfortunately going to be replaced before they ever make it to the top of the list. That's just how it works in this sort of an environment where money is too tight. So I'm not sure spending money to figure out how much it's going to cost to do something that's way down on the priority list. I would be more, my experience is you figure out what the interconnectivity is between the projects. You understand how they fit together. So you want to make sure your sequencing is right and that your priorities make sense and are aligned with your goals. That's my input.
Thank you, Lois. And I guess there's also the concept that there are mission critical projects that have to be addressed in pretty short order and other things that may just be on a wish list. Sarah, I'm curious, with your experience with capital project planning for the city of Paso Robles, how far out were your capital plans that you constructed? Did you go 10, 20 years, or did you just remain at the typical 5-year plans?
Yeah, and I'll speak to actually my experience with capital planning was in the city of Santa Monica, so just before Paso Robles, and that was a bit of a different scale. I think there were 200 active projects and $500 million of active funding, and so it kind of ran depending on the type of project and the type of facility. So for example, and even we incorporated replacement funding for very costly city equipment, such as fire apparatus, for example. So 5 years was certainly the baseline. And I would say that was probably what we looked at for the majority of items, unless there was something like in Morro Bay's case, the One Water Plan, or a more long-term analysis that had been done. So to talk to the public facilities piece, for example, there was strategic planning that had been done for some portions of the organization, but not all portions of the organization. And so it was kind of across the board. I think that Morro Bay has an opportunity to start now and evaluate what is the priority. If we want to do, how holistic of an assessment do we want to do, or do we want to start with what we already have in place in the One Water Plan and then build from there? Our facilities the priority, our streets the priority, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the same time frame, I would say, for every type of capital project. I do think 5 years is, in my personal opinion, a good starting point, and I think for Morro Bay it would be a good starting point, because it's a manageable data set to start with from where we are at now, and then there will certainly be areas that we'll want to build on to go further out from there.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. And in your experience, did you see things drop off the list and get added to the list as new council members came and went?
I think one of the values of having even a 5-year plan is that the intent is for that to be a long-term planning document and exercise that transcends councils. I think that is a strength of the 5-year plan. So I didn't see that.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I agree. I think that 5 years is really what we should be looking at least initially, because anything beyond there, I think any projects beyond 5 years really can't be considered critical. And of course, I think it's more important, to Bart's point, that it's no use just coming up with projects or even spending engineering dollars on projects if you really have no way of funding projects. If you take that approach and you end up with a bunch of engineering plans and nothing ever gets done. And I actually experienced that with the water district that I took over. They had a lot of plans that never seemed to come to fruition. So I think 5 years would be the right target in my mind.
John, one other point that occurs to me at Cal Poly, sometimes having a project far enough along, and I think this has come up here in Morro Bay as well. If you do have a cost estimate and you have a project that's close and money becomes available, like I don't know what's going to happen with the infrastructure bill, for example, what's going to be required. So if a project isn't far enough along in its development and cost estimates, then you can't take advantage of those. But you can't do everything. So, focus on the priorities again, align them with the goals. And I think and have reasonable expectations. I really believe that's the way to do it.
Right, and I think Scott, that is the approach the city has taken in regards to the traffic circle at the 41-1 interchange, right? I mean, because there are multiple agencies involved with that, Caltrans and SlowCog and the city. So the city wants to get that project up to a point where it actually can get funded with dollars other than the city's dollars. And I think that's the right approach. You have to take that kind of approach to get things done. But there are a lot of projects that really don't stack up that way. Okay, in any event, we're going kind of far afield on this first question, but as far as the city's goals, the 4 goals plus the extra one that Scott talked about, COVID, anything else we need to comment about those, or do we think they're all right?
I'll speak, John. I think they're all appropriate. They're high level enough. And I do believe the answer to Scott's first question is yes. I haven't heard anything that in my mind that would change that. I think the challenge, as the comments have been made, the remaining action items that have some work completed from the Market Street Plaza through, emergency warming shelter, et cetera, those are all very lofty goals as well. I think from a citizen's perspective, it's a little hard for me to certainly to comment on those because I don't know how doable they are and how they fit into maybe some of the other priorities for the city. I would, coming from the technology field for many years, bring high-speed internet, but I don't know, we tried to do that 4 or 5 years ago and we weren't successful. So I think for those, maybe it's just a prioritization. I would rely on staff input for some of that. And then the only other comment is, and it's similar, I support what Homer says about knowing what things cost, but I think the feedback you would get from citizens is we'd be doing another consultant study as opposed to maybe not doing, spending money on consultants versus trying to prioritize this somehow before we go out and try to price it.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. Tina, did you have any comments on this question?
yes and no. My experience has not been in city strategic planning, it's been in corporate planning. And time horizon is a big consideration because of the rate of change and the fact that long-term planning sounds great, but has a tendency not to work very well. So the 5-year thing that you were remarking upon, I can sort of see, even though I'm not conversant with the kind of capital project that's going to take longer than 5 years to complete. So there is an issue there in my mind that that the time horizon of any specific project that could be a priority is in fact longer than a 5-year view. The other comment I have is that on the goals themselves, they are very high, to Barbara's point, which I think by necessity they probably have to be, in all truth, because they need to kind of embrace all the potential work a city like ours might want to do or achieve. I again don't, things go through my head as a citizen, not as a member of this committee, that I don't understand the consequences of. For example, the wind project the idea that energy, technology, the world is changing, and those impacts, and how do they roll down, and what do they mean in terms of not just impact on how the citizen experiences their community, but what the revenue projections are and how they fit into. There might be certain projects, is what I'm trying to say, and I'm not necessarily picking on wind, but I picked on wind because it's an unknown to me. But that doesn't mean my mind is closed to it. Au contraire, my mind is open to it. But what I don't know is what its true revenue potential is. And if there isn't something on a list of ours that has the potential to jump our revenue in some significant way. So where I become confused is, as a new city person, is a project that has the goodwill for the community at heart in a interactive way of the city, how I live and walk and use a road, versus one that quadruples income. So I mean, maybe I'm pie in the sky here, but I'm wondering, do we attach revenue targets to our goals? I'm sorry if that seems naive. Scott, I guess I would ask you that question, huh?
I don't think that's naive at all. I think that's an excellent way of assessing action items, and then also how we are moving towards achieving at least the top goal of financial and economic sustainability. I think the council has asked for that, inquired about that. I think it's you probably know, and going through this on the corporate side, it's easier said than done to have the data readily available and actually know what the data is telling you and not get mixed signals. But I think it's a fantastic question. We haven't gotten to that level, but I don't think that's naive at all. And I think there's value in maybe better defining the action items and what the hopes are and what they're intending to do and how they can improve things, on that level.
Yeah, well then good, because in the corporate world too, of course, our objectives are not quite so mixed. I mean, a city has actually much more complex reality in terms of what it's trying to accomplish and all the different parties it has to please. But one of the things that I'm wondering about is the prioritization scheme is not just the purely obvious sense of dollars, but also there could be something on our list from a revenue potential perspective that actually makes it possible to fund something else on the list. And so I know somebody made a reference to the relationship of things to things. Some projects obviously in a domino sort of sense, they may have a relationship or they may facilitate the ability to do something later on because they exist first. So in a way, weirdly, Highway 41, I drive that thing all the time and I look at it and think, oh my God, if I was wealthy enough, I'd write the damn check myself to get the study done because we need it so desperately, quite honestly. And so that one is, an example to me where I feel we're a little powerless. I mean, I don't know how we get the money, because if I understood that one, I know I'm going specific now and I apologize, but if I understood that we had to fund the study, and I thought we had come up short or even voted not to, or, is that really still alive? Or
Yes, it is. The council approved the expenditure to extend the study on a cost-sharing basis with SLOCOG. And the request that came from CFAC is to identify how we would fund the remaining gap. That's assuming that the $4 million that SLOCOG has assigned to this project is still on the table. And from all indications, it is. And I think they're formally reviewing that. Rob, I think, might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but sometime this fall. But they were looking for a commitment from the city, because up to this point, over the 20 years or so, they've been talking about this project or a project to improve that intersection. I don't think the city's really submitted any of its general fund money to the project.
I'm sorry.
That question is very much alive, and Commissioner Beckman has brought it up before about how we intend to satisfy the gap. Obviously, we'd love to fill all the remainder with outside dollars. And so in every other city, basically every city's in our position in terms of infrastructure needs.
Yes.
But somehow we'd have to fill the gap with other dollars that we possess, and that's where prioritization comes into play.
Right. Well, and I sort of slightly rat-holed us by doing that, and I didn't really mean to. But the other thing, and my last comment is, when I look at our goals, our 4 goals and 4.5, so to speak, they kind of indicate quality measures in a way, and, which kind of suggest matrixing, not just the spreadsheet, but that an actual precise goal may also hit 3 out of 4 categories, or 4 out of 4, or 2 out of 4, and that might be another aspect that helps us market them as well, if there's some selling that needs to be done. But anyway, that's my last comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. So those are all very good comments and questions, but I didn't really hear anybody say anything specific about changing any of the 4 goals or the 5th goal, which I guess is temporary. So can we just, what's your pleasure? Do you want to vote on this, or do you want to just say,
John,
you don't have anything to add?
can I interrupt for a minute?
Sure, Homer.
I've been thinking about the process, not so much the individual goals themselves or the objectives. And I think over the last 6 years, the process has changed a little bit. And I looked up the original white paper that the previous city manager wrote in November of 15. And his definition of a goal was, I'm going to read it, goals are broad-based projects which we want to accomplish in the long term, 4 to 6 year period, usually because they are big enough and broad enough that they can't be accomplished in a year or 2. An example of the goal is improve streets. I think that's still very much part of what's going on. But the second thing is where the objective is where I think it's come off the track a little bit. The objective is, biannual objectives are specific, discrete, medium-term, 1 to 2 year projects that support a more general goal, are feasible and achievable if appropriately resourced, and can be directly budgeted against. An example of an objective related to the goal of improved streets could be something like repave 10% of the streets in FY16, 17, 18. With that in mind, I have a couple suggestions on something for our committee to think about, and if we think they're good ideas, maybe encourage the city staff to consider them, and then maybe even somehow get passed along to the city council. The first is, I think the objectives under each goal should be divided into 2 groups. short-term and long-term. The short-term objective should be accomplished in 2 years. The long-term objectives should be kept on the list just so they stay in front of the city staff. Currently, they are commingled. That's one. The current 4 goals have a total of 26 objectives listed. For the city staff to accomplish all 26, they needed to complete 1 a month during the last 2-year period while still running the city. I suggest the city council be limited to only 12 objectives, which means the staff would be required to complete 1.5 each quarter, which I believe is much more realistic. Each of the short-term objectives should include a funding source where appropriate. Objectives should note if the Coastal Commission needs to be involved. If so, those objectives may be candidates for the long-term list. Each objective should have a city council defined measurement for success, hopefully something that can be measured quantitatively. This should clarify to the staff the city council's intent. Those are just several suggestions I have that might improve the process.
Okay, Homer, thank you. Yeah, I'm not sure what to do with that. I mean, we're really we're getting involved now with telling the city staff how to do their job, and I don't think that that's our role.
I said suggested, and I said,
well, okay, well that's fine, but as an individual citizen, maybe you can make those suggestions. But the role of this committee is advisory to the city council. It's not to tell the city staff how to do their job. And I think we're going kind of in a wrong direction there with that kind of detail. I'm sorry.
So if the committee is interested in that, I mean, I don't necessarily take it as a telling us how to do their job, but maybe just a better way to organize, I guess, maybe the way to discuss this. But we're all always, and council's open to that. I mean, to explain the rationale for the change. When I started, we had 87 objectives and 10 goals when I started in 2017. So, and then the objectives below objectives were action items, and I just, I could tell from staff level and council level that it just was become indecipherable what the difference was, and also just mind-boggling how we would ever get anything done because we had achieved 0 objectives in a year or 2. So that's why we whittled that list down and sort of took away another layer. But I can see where the concern about, okay, well, now that you've taken away objectives, which really help define what the goals are, you lose something in translation. So we're certainly open to that input if it comes from the committee. That's okay, but certainly want to hear from the other members.
Well, Homer, it's Tina. I'm thinking that how you phrased it, and you gave some examples, what you're really saying, I believe, and just correct me if I'm incorrect, is you're trying to come up with ways to create a schematic, a scheme, a prioritization, a way to look at and make edible, if you will, and digestible the actual task of creating a list. And I don't know about all the timelines of things getting done in a quarter or whatever, even though I understand the implication that plans, in my experience, always they're like smorgasbords. All the desserts look edible in one sitting, and they're not. But is that what you're really saying? Here's some ways that we could tackle this and give us some prioritization or give some meaningfulness so that the decision is rendered maybe a little bit easier, but so is the communication about how the decision was made.
Yeah, my intent was really basically to help the city staff out. I just use the 1.25 a quarter as just an example. I mean, I wouldn't, but instead of having 26 objectives, the city council needs to sort of not keep growing this list. And then the other thing too is that on the existing 26 objectives, there are several of those that have been on the list since 2015. And they need to be segregated out so that the citizens and the city council and the committees and everybody can say, okay, these are 12 things we want to get done in the next 2 years that relate to these 4 goals. Maybe there's, and so there's a chance that they'll get done. If you look at the existing list, 9 of the 26 are in the color coding. They're still white, which means they fundamentally they've been thought about, but nobody's done anything. And that's not fair to the city staff. To have the city council, which is the one that's directed them to do the work, to say, this is all, we want you to get these 26 things done, which is unrealistic. That was the intent. And then they add a little bit to it. I think that you shouldn't have an objective unless there's some way to pay for it. It's only a 1 to 2 year sort of thing. I also think that the result should be something that the city council understands, that they have input into what is success, so that Scott and his group are really understand the intent of what the objective was.
Hey, John, is it okay if we continue to engage for a little while longer on this topic, or are we goofing up the agenda? Because I wanted to just say one comment, Homer, that, it sounds good. It sounds good on paper that we should have the funding to do something. But I also think it's important that if the goal is important, the objective, is important, and we don't have the funding, that absolutely doesn't change the prioritization of it. In other words, there's a priority that says I can afford to do it, but there's also a priority that says I wished I could have afforded to do it, and I don't want to lose sight of those either. But anyway, that's just I'm getting esoteric. Scott, I have one question though about the COVID goal. And I'm wondering if there isn't a reasonable placeholder for some unexpected, or if it has to be always very definitive at that level. The idea that we've now experienced this as a city and as a people, if there isn't sort of a catch-all for the health and well-being of the community, or I don't really know how that one would be phrased in that sense, but I'm just wondering if something like that is going to kind of always be with us now. I don't know how anybody else feels about that, but I'm stopping now.
Yeah, that you sometimes often see that in some kind of like quality of life goal. Oftentimes you see public safety as a goal in other communities. The way the tack the city took was that we were sort of assuming operations are handled the day-to-day, and that this is more of the aspirational stuff, that future-oriented things that we still get done, not all pie in the sky, but the things that lead us forward. But I've heard from others that, sometimes we forget about the day-to-day stuff that enriches lives, like recreation, and obviously the pandemic response is a little outside of that, but similar to the well-being piece. So that's not uncommon for cities to have things like that in their goals.
Lois, I see that you're unmuted. Did you have something to add?
Only that I support the 4+1 goals at the high level. I like that it's a short list. I'm in favor of that, and just that I also believe Homer is correct that it would be good to have a measurement, how to quantify success on a goal. I don't know how else the city knows whether they've achieved if it's not stated, but that's just kind of obvious to me. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Does anyone want to make a motion that the committee agrees with the 4+1 goals?
Chair Martin, this is Sarah. I apologize. I just wanted to remind you to take public comment on this item, perhaps before you take an action.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Are there any public comments on this item?
Thank you, Chair. We have one public commenter. This is Erica Crawford. Erica, your mic has been unmuted.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Chair Martin, and thanks for indulging me just with a few minutes of comment. Good afternoon to CFAC members and city staff. Thank you for your time invested in this very important item on City Council goal setting. The Chamber, which is the only multi-industry advocacy nonprofit organization in the city with 283 members that collectively provide over 3,000 jobs, too has invested time into understanding what our members want and need in order to feel supported by their government and to thrive over the next 2 years. The Chamber conducted a number of strategies to determine recommendations for city goals, including an online survey, a community squeaky wheel workshop, with participants providing feedback with dot voting and comment cards, a review of proposed city goals by the Governmental Affairs Committee, and ultimately just this morning, a board of directors approved policy direction. From our outreach, there is a belief that the city's fiscal issues have been substantially addressed and that it is time to get on with actual improvements. What follows are 4 major areas of interest that have been identified. First is sanitation, maintenance, and beautification. Appearances and cleanliness matter. Objectives that may fall under this goal could include completion of a paid parking investigation and public access improvements that could be improved with such revenue, and prioritizing the use of Measure Q and E funds for sanitation and maintenance of existing physical assets in the business districts. Second is housing. The housing crisis is getting worse, and we must work collectively to fix it. Business owners want more housing for themselves and their employees and an expanding resource of year-round customers. The lack of housing and a local labor force continues to threaten the sustainability of Moore-based businesses, the local economy, and city fiscal resources. Some objectives could include completing the zoning code, creating pre-approved stock ADU plans, and development of objective design standards for all housing types. Third is circulation. We'd like to get moving. Resolution of many of the circulation issues that were identified in the GPLCP were deferred to some future date. These include a circulation plan for the area encompassing the north side of Embarcadero across the Vista property and the wastewater treatment plant over to Atascadero Road to provide essential emergency access, relieving weekend gridlock on the Embarcadero, prioritizing pedestrian and bike modes on the waterfront, and identifying feasible and perhaps innovative financing methods, such as EIFDs for improvements. And then finally, the Chamber is advocating that importance be placed on infrastructure, and I've heard you talk about that today. It's time to get serious about the future. The city has stated that it will develop an infrastructure financing plan, and that is a necessary first step, along with developing new revenue sources. Development of a feasible infrastructure plan is important to the business community, and they want to see their tax dollars invested in tangible improvements. I hope that these 4 areas of interest expressed by members of the business community in Moore Bay will be helpful as you consider your specific action items today. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you, Erica. Are there any other public comments?
Thank you, Chair. There are no more commenters in the queue.
Okay, then we will close public comments. And do we have a motion by anyone to approve the 4 council-defined goals as stated?
Hey, John, let me try something on that, please.
Okay.
So I would make a motion to approve the 4 general high-level goals as stated, with the addition of, wherever possible, try to employ the quote SMART acronym to the goals, being specific goals, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time sensitive. And if that's too much, you can take that last phrase off. But I think that captures some of what we're discussing.
Okay. Well, I know there are a lot of ways to slice and dice this planning, long-term planning, goal setting, objectives. I mean, there's a lot of terms that people use in different ways. the broad goals, as I understand it, should never have any kind of a time set on them. It's the action items or / objectives, as Homer mentioned, that need to have a defined budget, time frame, that kind of thing, more specific, achievable. But the 4 goals, those are just overarching goals that don't. Those could go on they could be on the list forever. I mean, to achieve financial sustainability, are you ever going to remove that?
Then maybe those should be applied more to the objectives as we drill down.
Right.
John?
Yes, sir.
Just amend Barbara's motion a little bit. We agree, the committee agrees with the 4 goals as stated, and then using her same words, except take the word goal out and change it to objective.
Okay, well, the terminology that the city staff uses is action item, I believe.
Action items?
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, and use Barbara's words for the action items instead of goals.
Okay. So the 4 goals plus 1 are okay. But the action items need to have the SMART acronym applied to them.
Or if you don't want to say SMART acronym, just say they should be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and have a time component where possible.
Okay, all right. Sarah, did you get that motion? Are we okay with that?
I did, and that's the benefit of the recording as well.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. So then Homer amended Barbara's motion. So Barbara, do you want to second that amended motion, and then we'll proceed from there?
Certainly. I'll second the motion I previously stated as amended by Homer.
Okay, thank you. So now we have a motion and a second, and I guess we need to do roll call, Sarah.
Okay. Committee Member Alexander?
Yes.
Committee Member Beckman?
Yes.
Committee Member Johnson?
Yes.
And Committee Member Peck is absent. Committee Member Weiner?
Yes.
Vice Chair Spagnola?
Yes.
And Chair Martin?
Yes. Okay, well, now we're on to question number 2.
Would you like a refresh?
No, I've got it.
All right.
So we resolved, it's only 4, not 5 action items that the Administrative Services Department is going to be, or it says reflects priority needs. And this is kind of I guess, things that were on the list already and things that have been kind of condensed from the list that we provided earlier. So do I hear any discussion about that item, about those things? Do we agree with the city staff's characterization of those 4 items? Or are there questions about those? Okay, Scott, I have a question for you. So at some point, the work plan gets submitted to the city council. Is it understood that that work plan is a request coming from this committee to the city council, or is it coming from staff with input from this committee? How does that work?
So the way we did it a couple years ago was what I did was I provided the input from the various boards and committees and then the general community through the survey and summarized it so that they knew precisely what to best of our ability to reflect back what you tell us today and what the other committees told us before. Here's what we recommend you work on, City Council. And so then they know who it came from, and then they, the next meeting after that, they get to decide, which of those items or other items make the list, as it were. And then our job is to reflect that back to the committee to say, okay, council's told us this is what we're going to be working on for the next year and a half, and here's how it relates to your work as a committee. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yes, it does.
Okay.
So the way I look at this is that, we are an advisory body to the city council. And if we want to make recommendations along those lines, that these are the things we think you, city council, should be looking at, that's fine. But ultimately, the specific work plan that this committee does is assigned to it by the city council.
Correct. And to be clear, there are some things that are sort of action items could be used in a lot of different ways. So when I say action items here, that another way to look at it is sort of the objectives definition. It's a little bit of a higher level initiative that maybe has more time certainty to it, whereas there are components of your quote unquote work plan that are evergreen. You're always going to do them. You're always going to review, right, measure EQ, right? I'm not going to put that on the list of initiatives. Or looking at city council compensation, I'm not going to put that on because these are things that sort of come up that we have to do every once in a while, or things we do ongoing aren't on that list. Does that make sense? But it does. These things would be added on top of your normal workload.
It makes sense.
Okay.
And I just want to make sure that we understand that we don't go running off studying issues that the city council has not has not assigned to us.
That's right. And not to say that, let's say we get down to, we're in the next calendar year and a big issue comes up, we don't know what it's going to be, that may warrant moving up in discussion because it's so pertinent and important. There is room in this process to bump other things off the list to make room for things that come up in the middle of the process. It hasn't happened very often, but COVID-19 certainly did that last year.
Okay. Yeah. And then some of these items that the Administrative Services Department works on, we've had very little to do with, like, for example, the cost allocation plan. Wasn't that done between staff and a consultant?
Yes, and then ultimately council. Yes.
And the paid parking issue, that's being also done by a consultant, correct?
It is being done by a consultant, the study itself, and then we will relay it back to the pertinent advisory bodies. And at this point, PWAB is sort of the main holder of it because parking sort of, in any normal city where you actually have parking management, typically falls to the Public Works Department. And because there's a harbor component, it may also wind up at the harbor department. And we will keep this committee apprised of sort of how it's moving forward, especially if we get into a place where we're actually looking to move forward with the plan, because there's implementation components that would have impacts on our finances. So we would.
Okay, so yeah. Scott, on those kind of projects where you have a professional consultant or engineers who are studying this issue in detail, and they're making recommendations to the city council, what role or what do we add to that discussion? I mean, we don't have access to the information, to the details. We don't have the specific knowledge that these engineers and consultants have. What are we really adding to that?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I don't know there'd be a whole lot to add to that. That's not to say it's not important to hear from the community. And I think, again, that a PWAB would be pertinent because it could become a new work, literally a whole new work program for Public Works Department. And it's important that they provide some input on that. And then the harbor could be a beneficiary of a paid parking system if we move in that direction, which could help address some of those interconnectivity issues with public access and parking and the streets and the lighting, et cetera. So there could be enough synergy there where the Harbor Advisory Board would want to provide some input. And they've been talking about parking for the last 10 years at the Harbor Advisory Board level. But as far as getting down to the nitty gritty, I wouldn't expect this group to do that but there could become a time where that may be necessary if we go further down the road with parking.
Okay,
So I guess another way to answer that, John, is that not everything that's on this list necessarily is going to go through a committee or a board. Not all these things will, but a lot of them do. If that makes sense. So some things just go directly from staff to council, and a lot of things also go through advisory boards before they get to council.
Okay.
Yeah.
May I?
Sure, go ahead, Tina.
So are we saying that that list has the potential to come to CFAC or any of the other committees, and that's a reasonable list to derive because we're trying to think ahead as to things that could be interesting to CFAC under the correct conditions? Is that what I just heard?
What I think that's a good way of distilling it, but also these are a way of sort of consolidating some of the things we've been hearing from this committee about areas in that not only which they're interested in, but are important avenues for exploration for the city, of which this committee could lend their expertise towards. So I think those, maybe it's saying the same thing a little different.
Add it together. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I think the concept that some of us on the committee have had in regards to this work plan is that some of these items we could actually work on in detail. So, for example, one in particular, the OPEB, that we would actually meet with staff and do some research and find out, what are the particulars, what are the options, and those kind of things, and actually do quite a bit of the actual digging. Is that something that you would not see this committee doing, or are we supposed to just review work that's already been done, or are there opportunities for us to actually dig in and do some of the detail work?
I mean, I think that question is open. I don't think it's fully defined. I think some of that they need to work with Sarah on. I know this committee has been helpful in actually doing some work for staff, but we want to be careful we don't push our volunteers too hard. So, but I think it's certainly a discussion we could have. But a lot of the role is to provide an extra layer of review before City Council takes something up.
Again, John, under the condition that you just gave as an example, were such a thing to occur, you're thinking a subcommittee would be created?
Yes, that's
a given task. Okay, got it.
That's what I was thinking of, and in fact, there was one item on our list. I'll read it here: research potential small revenue enhancements and expense reductions that the city staff currently does not have time or resources to pursue. So that's one that was suggested by one of our members that specifically addresses a subcommittee to do the work that staff doesn't have time to do. So, I mean, does anybody want to address that with whoever submitted that one? What was your concept?
I was the one that submitted that, and what I wrote is exactly my intention, is to try to give Sarah a hand, some free consulting labor. And my thought would be is that our subcommittee would prepare a report, submit it to Sarah, and then she would throw it in the trash can or do something about it. That would be basically the way I would look at it. I mean, everybody on this committee's got time to do stuff like that. But John, I do have one other question. I do have a question for the committee on the four main objectives or action items. And this is a question for the committee. The third one, develop a multi-year capital improvement budget and financing. Is that an action item, or is that actually a goal?
might be speaking out of turn here, but I think that would be an action item that falls under the goal number 2, which is improve public infrastructure. But I don't want to get too twisted up about, terminology and things. I think we need to make it clear to the city council couple things, that we have folks here on this committee who have some capabilities and who have time and are willing to help and set up subcommittees and look into these things that maybe the city council wants to have looked at. Maybe the staff does have time, maybe they don't have time. I don't know. I mean, there's a transition going on now. But we're open to helping in a lot of different ways. And, we're happy to pursue whatever the city council assigns to us, but, probably we could do more than what we've been doing, especially if we don't limit ourselves to 7 meetings a year and we actually can set up subcommittees. But, these things don't come with zero staff time either. I mean, Homer, what you talked about, pursuing these small initiatives, that does require some help from city staff. That it's not free time for them. It's free time for us, but they would have to make a small investment too. And they know better what time they have available, and we shouldn't be stepping on toes, we just need to be as helpful as we can within the constraints that exist. So as far as these 4 items, and then there was a 5th one, which I guess, I don't know if it's going to come to our committee or not, but the mayor made a request that the city council compensation be reviewed by our committee, but we'll see what happens with that. So are you in agreement that these 4 action items are okay, even though we may not actually work on all of these?
Another way to look at it, if we can't input unless there's consensus on that, you could sort of say priority 1, 2, 3, and 4 is another way to look at it, or these are top 2 priorities or whatever, or it can just be moved forward as all 4, and council can move forward as assuming they're all of equal importance.
Well, Scott, I'm looking for your leadership on this. I mean, I think the staff knows more than we do as to what the priorities are. You tell us.
Yeah, if I may also support you, John, on that, because like the CalPERS, et cetera, I mean, there's an opportunity to lower costs, So, not to disparage any other thing on the list, but I don't know enough about a cost allocation plan, so I can't speak intelligently about it. I'm sorry. To vote even, someone has to help me out. But develop a multi-year capital improvement budget and financial strategy with other committees. I mean, that, just by the leading word develop, doesn't suggest it's something sensible to think about and come up with recommendations, but it doesn't necessarily cut to the bottom line. And again, because I come from the private sector, I kind of like to make money or cut costs. So my interest would be in prioritizing something that doesn't take too much staff time, obviously, but also whoever's on the subcommittee literally brings true value back. And I like one that brings money back. So it looks like there's only one on that list that could do that. Am I wrong? On that list of 4. Or am I oversimplifying? Wrong is probably the wrong word.
Well, there's actually a couple of them, but
I'll make a motion, John.
sure.
We agree that the Administrative Services Department's defined action items should be included in the upcoming goals process.
Do I hear a second?
where I'm trying to digest it. I'm feeling a tiny bit overwhelmed by and a little nervous to commit. It sounds logical, Homer. I guess I second. Sorry, I'm trying to think it through.
Okay, Sarah. So we have a motion by Homer and we have a second by Tina. Homer, could you restate your motion just so everybody gets clear on what we're voting on?
I don't know if it's we or the CFAC agrees that the Administrative Services Department defined action items should be included in the upcoming goals process.
Thank you. Okay, Sarah.
Okay. Committee Member Alexander?
Yes?
Committee Member Beckman?
Yes.
Committee Member Johnson?
Yes.
And Committee Member Peck is absent. Committee Member Wiener?
Yes.
Vice Chair Spagnola?
Yes.
And Chair Martin?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so that completes that item. Scott, were we supposed to do anything else with that?
No, sir. Thank you all for your valuable input, and we'll keep you posted as this moves through the City Council process. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we're going to move on to item B3, which is the quarterly investment report. Sarah?
Yes, and today we're going to have our senior accounting technician, Valerie Webb, present this report to you. She's the one that's been preparing these quarterly reports as of late, and so I want to thank her for that. And she's also the one that'll be preparing your minutes for this meeting, so I want to thank her for that. And I'll also be available to answer any questions with her after her presentation. Go ahead, Val. Valerie, I don't think we can hear you. We can see your screen. If you'd like to come into my office and if the audio's having issues, you can present from in here.
Just a question. This is Anthony from AGP Video. Is Valerie calling in?
She is actually on her.
Well, sadly, if you are calling in, you are unable to share your screen. In doing so, if she's able to get to some type of computer, she will be able to share her screen. But since she is just calling on the phone, unfortunately, Zoom does not, for some reason, allow the share screen option on that.
Okay, I can go ahead and share my screen on her behalf.
Okay.
But I am concerned about the audio. So Valerie, I'm wondering, is there a way to put through her phone audio, or do we need to have her come to a different computer?
From what I can see, her phone is unmuted. So I believe it is star 6 to unmute. But it looks like she has already done so. So I'm not sure why we're not getting a signal from her, to be honest.
Okay.
We can have her hang up and try to call back. I can bring her back in on the attendee, and she'll be able to speak then if she wants to try to call right back. It looks like she just disappeared. It looks like she may be calling back.
I can actually see her. She's trying to call back in right now. Sorry for the delay. I just want to ask the committee, can you all see my screen share?
Yes.
Okay.
I just dialed back in. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Well, apologize about that. So I'll try to keep this brief. This is our quarterly performance report for April through June of 2021. As you can see there towards the bottom, our average rate of return is 0.373 at this point, which is about in line with LAIF performance of 0.3%. We've recorded $171,115.63 of interest for the year. That all gets posted to the general fund initially, but as one of our year-end journal entries, we'll be distributing that amongst the other funds. As we're continuing to keep most of the cash balances in the LAIF account, that's to keep it relatively accessible for cash flow reasons. We're keeping an eye on additional liquidity due to the projected expenditures on the wharf project in the upcoming months. We have budgeted for 21-22, $88.5 million. So we'll need as much of the cash flow available for that as possible. Staff recommends no immediate investment actions be taken at this time. When the wharf project is nearing completion, we can focus on the best way to meet Council's investment goals. So that's all I wanted to say about that. If anyone has any questions.
Hey, Valerie, thank you. And
thank you.
Nicely done. Any questions for Valerie or for Sarah?
Hi, it's Barbara. Thank you, Valerie, for that. I just have one question. The CD from Goldman Sachs that looks like it's matured now, is that going to be moved to LAIF, did you say?
It has matured, so it initially rolled over into Mechanics Bank and just kind of joined the pot there. I believe our LAIF is similar as of today to what it was at June 30th.
Okay, thanks. Is it easy to roll it over into LAIF, or does it just automatically go to Mechanics? It, just seems that interest rate's a lot different.
It's relatively easy to move things between LAIF, but we try not to do that, on a daily basis or anything.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Just a question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? All right, hearing none. I did have a question for Sarah. Sarah, are you the city's treasurer now?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So this is your report. Okay.
Right.
All right. If there are no other questions, then I think we can probably move on.
Since we'll be taking a vote to receive it, would you mind opening public comment?
Oh, I see. I'm sorry. Thank you.
That's fine.
All right. Any public comments on this item?
Thank you, Chair. I do not see any hands raised in the queue.
Okay. Thank you. So we'll close public comments. So, Sarah, you would want us to actually approve this with a vote?
John, can I make a comment to Sarah before we approve this?
Sure.
The last sentence in the staff report explains why it might be necessary to engage in some interim financing for cash flow reasons. And I know the individual that made the public comment that turned in a report earlier, and he's a smart guy. So it concerned me that he missed the reason why interim financing was necessary. And I'm just hoping that when this is presented to the city council, I assume next week, that it's made very clear that the reason that the city might have to secure interim financing is because of the way the state of California's bureaucracy isn't functioning very well, and not because of some issue with the city of Morro Bay's cash management.
Good point.
Comment received. Thank you. We'll make sure that's clear. Oops, Chair Martin, I think you're muted.
Homer, while your microphone is unmuted, would you like to make a motion to approve this?
I make a motion that the CFAC committee receive the fourth quarter 2021, wrong staff report. I make a motion that the CFAC receive the fourth quarter investment report for the full year 2020-2021.
This is Lois, and I'll second.
Okay. Sarah?
Great. Committee Member Alexander?
Yes.
Committee Member Beckman?
Yes.
Committee Member Johnson?
Yes.
And Committee Member Peck is absent. Committee Member Wiener?
Yes.
Vice Chair Spagnola?
Yes.
And Chair Martin?
Yes.
Thank you.
And now for the item that everybody's been waiting for, quarterly review of the water reclamation facility quarterly update report.
And we have Kyle Rohr with Carrillo Engineers here to provide you that presentation.
Thanks, Sarah. Chair Martin and members of CFAC, good afternoon. I'm Kyle Rohr with Carrillo Engineers, Program Manager for the WARF program. I have a short presentation. I'm going to attempt to share screen on the 5th different platform I've used today, so hopefully this will work. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Terrific. So we're going to be the Q4 2021 report. This will be the recommendation that Member Alexander actually started to read, so he'll be ready for it. It's to receive the quarterly report for Q4 2021. I want to kick off by saying that this presentation is remarkable, but not remarkable, as you've seen pretty much everything in it. The summary of the budget status as of the end of Q4. We're currently at 144,674,877 is the Q4 reconciled baseline, reconciled budget for the quarter versus the baseline of 125,941. As I was with you in May, we discussed that the reason for this increase from the Q3 reconciliation of around 139 mil. We discussed in May the budget increase was due to amendments for the work treatment due to change orders, additional archaeological investigation costs to the conveyance system, additional program management costs for construction management, mostly related to the conveyance, as well as permitting, funding, and pre-treatment support, and additional hydro permitting and design costs for the recycled water facilities element of the program, and additional construction contingency for a variety of issues related across all project elements. So we talked about that in May, and I'm prepared to go back to that discussion if you all need. Project status in terms of schedule, we remain on schedule. The time schedule order from the Regional Water Quality Control Board requires secondary treatment by the 28th of the 28th of February of 2023. We're scheduled to have substantial completion and being able to treat wastewater to the required standards by July 5th of 2022, or 238 days prior to the deadline mandated by the Regional Water Quality Control Board. I shared this with you in May as a sneak peek at the Q4 report. We ended up at 144,674, which is a tad lower than the number I gave you in May, $60,000 or $70,000 or so less. Here's a snapshot of the expenditures to date, which are the basis of the Q4 report. At the end of Q3, we had spent about 42 mil, and the end of Q4, we're at about 55.5. The table to the right shows you the 13 million and change that we spent during Q4 and what we spent it on. And again, this is all in the report you have. Current versus planned expenditures. So we had a good discussion in May, and you asked the questions that I would expect to be asked on why aren't we spending this money quickly enough, and then I gave you a heads up that the Q4 report is going to show you a different story, and you can see by the end of June we're starting to spike in terms of the actual expenditures. There was a question about this graph, and I thought I would just kind of half answer it at the beginning, and we can get back to it if you like. We have $88 million forecasted for the program spend for the fiscal 21-22. And Sarah, please interrupt me or chime in as you like. And one of the members of the committee wisely and meticulously, I might add, counted up the bars and realized, wait a minute, this isn't $88+ million. The reason is a couple-fold. This graph and this report, if you will, was completed with numbers that were done sometime in early July. Since then, there's a good chance that the amount of money we were carrying forward from 2021 to 21-22, which was somewhere in the neighborhood of $20 million, was likely spent in 2021. But because for the purposes of this report, we have to cut off the city accounting, if you will, data, so we have a snapshot in time, more expenditures have likely trickled in, and so moving forward, there will probably be less spend than $88 million in 21-22. In addition to that, since receiving the financial data, we have also revised the schedule of a number of the elements in terms of the burn rate on the money. And we can talk about that later if you want, but it was an astute observation that we probably aren't going to be spending, we definitely won't be spending the $88 million as a function of carryover and extension of the schedule. So I'm sorry I made that a little bit longer-winded than you wanted, but I can answer questions on that too later, and Sarah can chime in as well. The milestone schedule changed only slightly for the conveyance facilities, and I'm sure there's going to be questions about this. I believe, I don't have the report in front of me, I believe these only changed by about 10 days in terms of completion. The current schedule as of the end of Q4 and actually as of the end of last week still shows the conveyance being completed in April or early May of 2022. We can talk more about the schedule and particularly as it relates to the conveyance and some of the challenges they're having on that pipeline, and prepared to entertain questions on all that. So what is new, and one of you alluded to it or commented on it a minute ago, I think it was committee member Alexander, is that, and committee member Alexander was much more charitable to the state than I would have been. They are having a very hard time, the Division of Financial Assistance, in processing reimbursements and getting them out the door. Because of that, we are working with the city to somewhat conservatively make sure that you're not going to have short-term cash flow issues because of the slow reimbursement. To that end, we're working with city staff right now to figure out the timing, the magnitude of the potential shortfalls. So what we're doing specifically is we're looking at the monthly outlay projections based on the most current schedule. So this kind of goes back to my comment that are we really spend $88 million in fiscal 21-22? Probably not, because the schedules are looking like they're pushing a little bit, at least in terms of burn, not in terms of total completion at this point. We want to work with the funding agencies. We have a pretty good relationship, in my opinion, with the DFA represented from the regional board, and she's been pretty good in working with us on how to optimize where we're pulling the reimbursements from, whether it's the WIFIA bucket or the SRF bucket. And when the dust clears on this, the results of the analysis is going to determine what your borrowing needs are and the appropriate financing instruments that you might want to entertain. And Sarah can speak more to the bridge financing issues than I can. We're kind of in a supporting role like that right now. So that takes us to the end of the short presentation. And I'm happy to entertain questions.
Thank you, Kyle. Art, let's start with you. Do you have questions for Kyle?
Yes. I'll just really ask a few. I had previously been concerned that it didn't look like the schedule included testing for the recycled water that was added to the schedule. And I didn't really understand. I don't want to get into whatever this rationale is for the Microsoft project schedule being just sort of a plaything. But the December of 23 completion seems to comport with when the construction is done, not testing to make sure it works. And I've always been concerned. Now the Microsoft project schedule, basically, whether we agree with it or not, it does show testing and getting permitting from the Water Quality Board. So but you're saying in your response to my question, you're saying that literally in December of 23, we will have permitted potable water available for use in Morro Bay.
According to the schedule as of the end of Q4, and as frankly when I got up this morning, that is still the best supportable number we have.
I recognize that your schedule that you refer to does not show any testing or permitting, and you believe it's good to go.
The testing and permitting will happen prior to final completion. Final completion is December of 2023. There's a year-long construction period which incorporates the testing and permitting for the wells as they're installed as a schedule.
Okay, I don't follow that, but I'll take that offline.
Okay, fair enough. In the interest of full transparency, we do have concerns about that 2023 number, and we don't have a better number right now. And by Q1 of the report, I will have a better number for you.
Okay. I restated that. I'll try to talk to somebody in PWAB so they're ready to ask that tomorrow, because I'm not following what you're saying. And the use of Microsoft project schedule, as far as you've given a new definition to what that's even for. I do want to point out to the committee that response to my question about whether or not various things are included in the Carollo estimate of 12.2, the answer was basically no. There are things that we know about now that are not in that, so that will go on top of 12.2. My final question is there are some change orders to the tune of $2 to $4 million or whatever presented tomorrow to PWAB. I was told yesterday that a staff member believes that that $2 to $4 million is included in the $144 million estimate. Is that true?
So the PWAB, yes. What's being presented at PWAB tomorrow is let's start backwards with the conveyance.
That's all I need. If you're saying the $2 to $4 million, so after they say yes to that, 144 is not impacted.
Well, let me give you the number though. The number is, if I can find which specific question it was. The number in I will say this, the number in the POAB report is somewhere around 1.1 or something like that total, plus, it's 1.132. And in addition, there's another amendment for I think it's around $200,000 for waterworks engineers. That amount brings the total for the treatment plant to $76,697. There will also be discussion tomorrow about more of a heads up about change orders on the table for the annual conveyance. Those numbers are not in the number that I just gave you. And to some degree, they are in the $144 million number because we're carrying contingency for them.
Well, that's been the case all along. But so you're saying that the information being presented literally within 24 hours from now is in the $144 million estimate. So if they approve all that, you're basically saying if they prove that, which they've approved everything, nothing has ever not been approved. So it'll be at 144. The other comment I'd like to make, or make sure I understand it, one of the tables showed, and I like that it's happening because I've always encouraged the city to maximize the low interest financing, but it appears as if the 144, which will probably grow, but whatever, not probably, it will grow. But the 144 million is totally being funded through financing. And what that tells me is that the $17 million assumed in the rate study coming from monies collected for infrastructure can now in fact be used for infrastructure. Am I interpreting that correctly?
So unfortunately, Member Beckman, that predates me as program manager. So
it really doesn't matter though, because if you're fundamentally saying the 144 is all coming from financing, then because of what I happen to know, that money's collected is being used to manage the cash flow. But what that tells me is all that money that's been collected since the 144 is going to be paid for by financing will in 2 years become available to be used for infrastructure.
Right. Well, if
Homer, since it goes before, is that the way you interpret that?
Well, infrastructure and possibly other things. There's been some discussion, about, well, anyways, but yes, it could be used for both.
Versus the 17 that was assumed in the rate study, 17 million of the 125 was going to come from collected monies. Now that can be used, since maximizing the funding, the financing, that makes a whole bunch of money available in 2 years once we get through the cash flow issue.
Potentially. But a lot of that money that hasn't been spent on infrastructure has been accumulated and is sitting in the water and sewer funds reserves. Correct, Sarah? Or Scott?
Correct. And I think that was reflected in your investment report questions and numbers as well.
Okay. Well, that's definitely a very good thing. Okay. That's all. Thanks, John.
Okay, Homer, how about you? You have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions, but based on Bart's comments about the PWeb meeting on tomorrow evening, I have a suggestion for Kyle. I looked at that agenda, and it appeared to me that of the PCOs on the report that are still in discussion, that about a third of one of the conveyance system PCOs is a rerouting of a collection line on Tascadero Road. And if I understood the public services director at the last city council meeting, when he talked about the Canon contract, he said that routing would be done by Anvil through a change order, but in fact it was a collection system expense and then had the potential to save the city $1 million. My only suggestion would be is that before that goes to the city council, that maybe that line item and that one PCO be separated and be a separate item completely, so that again, the person that made the earlier public comment to us I think was confused about that, and that'll make that future PCO not be quite as onerous. Just a suggestion.
I understand. And Committee Member Alexander, I will not be making the presentation at PWAP tomorrow. It'll be Paul Amico from Corollo, and he is very knowledgeable at a detailed level about all the things associated with conveyance, and so I'm going to pass it along to him. So thank you.
And I do have a couple of questions for Kyle that are not in the report, but are just a personal observation. Before the bike path was closed, to the west of the bike path, about halfway down, there was this tremendous pile of dirt. I mean, it was huge. It was the size of a house, and I was curious what that's for.
I cannot begin to fathom, but I can definitely find out and get you an answer.
And the other question I have...
When was this?
A couple of days ago.
All right.
I mean, it's not something that happened overnight. It is such a huge pile of dirt. It's been accumulating, but it's on the Vista property, and just curious.
All I can assume is that they're using it for fill to refill the trench.
And the other thing that Bart might be interested in this is that on the east side of the bike path, between the bike path and Highway 1, there's a whole bunch of trees that have blue numbers on them. The largest number I saw was 80-something or other. And I'm curious,
I can answer that.
Bart's in the Audubon Society, so I think he might be interested.
Yeah, I can answer that if you want. So the trees, those trees are numbered. I think this came up in the last quarterly report as well. Those trees are numbered for inventorying and species identification purposes. They are not numbered because they can be torn down necessarily, although trees that do need to be removed based on the recommendation of your arborist are identified, by those numbers as well. But just the number doesn't mean they're going anywhere. They're just being cataloged. They're just cataloged and identified.
Just curious, that's all.
That's a good question. I'd ask.
Don't have any questions, Sean.
Thank you, Homer. Lois, do you have any questions?
Just one really related to the potential for the $20 million grant. Are we going to run out of time since we did not, we weren't awarded in this round, and it takes a couple of rounds usually to max out? So, I mean, that's $20 million. $20 million is a nice chunk of change. So
that's real money from where I come from. So you're referring to the Title 16 Bureau of Reclamation grant?
Yes.
So we weren't shortlisted this round, but we are already planning and we're already budgeted to reapply. So what we're going to be doing is Corollo's national funding expert who lives, drinks, and breathes this stuff. We're going to do a debrief with USBR and then improve the application next time on it and resubmit. What we don't know is the degree of funding that will be in that program next time around, but we are planning on resubmitting the application.
Okay, Okay, and so you think there's a 50-50, we're going to get 10. You don't really know. Wow. You don't know how much money is available.
I wouldn't dare say that in a public meeting. I don't.
Yeah, I really don't.
It depends on how they cut the pie. I mean, historically, that program has been smaller amounts to more people. I would be shocked if you got 10 million plus. I mean, it's just, and it really depends on how that program's funded.
Okay, and is there any insight infrastructure money?
Oh, you froze on that.
Is there any insight that you can share with the potential for the city, for this project to receive funding under the now in consideration federal infrastructure bill?
Too early to tell. As soon as I do have an inkling, and you all have a consultant that the city has engaged that helps us, get the ear of political. I mean, I want to say lobbyists, but that's kind of I don't know if that's an outdated term. But that's one of the things that we'll be working on once we know what the infrastructure package even looks like. And he's very good, and he was actually my childhood babysitter, so I thought I'd throw that in too.
I could add something about that. I noticed in the paper about 10 days ago that, according to a quote from Dianne Feinstein, that in the infrastructure package, there's $1 billion designated for water recycling projects for the Bureau of Reclamations. And she mentioned that she thought that California would receive a pretty good chunk of that $1 billion. And where I am, $1 billion is real money.
Yeah, I'm optimistic, but I've also been burned before on optimism. But we are definitely monitoring it, and as soon as we know more, we'll be all over it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rob. I noticed you are on video. Did you want to add something to Melissa's question?
Just wanted to add about the timeline for being reimbursed. Many projects are completed prior to receiving the Bureau of Reclamation grant money. In fact, San Jose and Orange County projects have been funded, I don't know for how many years, and they've been built and operating for 20 plus years, but they're still being reimbursed through the Bureau of Reclamation program.
That's great. Thanks, Rob.
Oh. Okay, Tina, do you have any questions?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara?
No, thanks for those questions, Bart, and all the comprehensive answers that helped.
Thank you, Barbara. I don't have any questions either. I want to make a note that Mr. Paul Donnelly sent an email with several questions, and I just want to make sure, Sarah, that his email gets into the information that goes to the City Council from our committee. And then I'll open public comments on this item.
Thank you, Chair. We have no raised hands in the queue.
Okay, very good. So I guess we're going to want to have a motion.
Sorry, Chair.
And,
Betty Winholtz has just raised her hand.
Oh, okay. Welcome, Betty.
All right, Betty, you are unmuted.
Thank you. I'm just curious. I read Mr. Donnelly's questions online, and when you say that you're going to pass them on to the City Council, does that mean that you yourselves will not be asking them right now? That's the end of my comment.
That's correct. So they went to the staff. The staff has them, and they should go on to the City Council as part of public comments, I believe. Sarah, do you have any other information on there?
I'm checking on what Morro Bay's practices are, but they were received by CFAC as agenda correspondence for this meeting, so it would be in your purview to either ensure that they were addressed at this meeting or to provide alternate direction to staff.
Well, inasmuch as the staff did not answer those questions specifically, and neither has the Corolla representative at the meeting.
I'm prepared to answer those questions if you want.
Okay, well then go ahead. So you have that. You received that email then?
Yes, sir. There's a lot. There's a lot of them. It would be, I guess, it'd be helpful if you had them and you could tell me which ones you wanted answered. But there's a lot. There's a lot of them kind of murky answers.
Well, quite
okay. Well, here's the custom that we've come to have. The committee members submit written questions, hopefully by Monday before the meeting.
Right.
And then staff on Tuesday responds with written answers to those questions. And so typically we don't have to ask those questions over again and get answers at the meeting because they've already been answered. But when it comes to an individual citizen asking questions, I don't see that there's any other way that they get answered unless you do it verbally. So I would think that all the questions would have to be asked, as if that member of the public were actually here asking them.
John, relative to Betty's comment, Paul put a lot of time in, and one of the questions I asked really came out of Paul's, and that was whether or not the change orders being discussed at PWAP tomorrow are included in the 144. It was not obvious to me, and nor was it to Paul, but that was significant in what he was asking, and the answer we got was everything being presented tomorrow, all the costs associated with that, are already considered to be included in the 144. So we did get an answer to a significant part of what Paul asked.
Yeah, and to clarify.
Okay, and a lot of his questions. Go ahead.
I just wanted to put a fine point on it. Is that the $76,697,000 would be the new contract amount for the treatment plant, and those are specific. Those PWAP, that PWAP staff report has it broken down in it's 1.132 or something like that. During tomorrow's PWAP meeting, there's going to be a discussion of another $2.47+ million on the annual conveyance side. That money, while not earmarked specifically to those change orders within the conveyance, is anticipated in the contingency increase that you saw for Q4, and it is in that 144.
Okay, and that's the question, of course, that bears on the costs and the financing and such. And some of his questions I can see now are really more appropriately asked at the PWAB meeting.
Yeah, they're pretty meaty.
Yeah. So.
But I'm happy to, if it pleases the committee, I'm happy to answer them. But again, they're some of them are quite technical.
Yeah, it looks to me now like most of these are more appropriately asked at the PWAB meeting. So I'm assuming he will be in attendance at that, or he'll be asking questions to PWAB, and hopefully he'll get his answers at that time. Okay, so no other questions or comments, then we need to have a motion to approve this item.
John, before we do that, can I make a comment?
Okay.
In the last paragraph of this staff report, it mentions that the options for a potential bridge loan would go to the city council before our committee had an opportunity to review the options. Since I think we have members that might add value to the discussion and provide a sanity check for the staff, I suggest we schedule a special meeting to review the various options and associated costs of a bridge loan. At our January 2020 meeting, our committee initiated the recommendation to reduce the number of meetings from 9 to 7. I think Barbara and Bart, John, you'll remember that. during that discussion, we all agreed, and I think we all agree, all means the city staff included, that if something important came up, we could add an additional meeting. Short-term borrowing of millions of dollars, I think, qualifies as important.
I agree. So you're looking at October 19th. Does that fit within the city council's or the city staff's work on this item? Hello.
To be completely honest, I don't know. It's pretty time sensitive, and we're just kind of getting our hands wrapped around what that process would look like. So it's hard to say if October, or I think you were proposing October.
October 19th.
Yeah, I don't know if it would make sense if that would be too late at that point. That's an excellent question.
Special, it could be anytime. And because it's going to be Zoom, by the way, are we ever going to not have Zoom?
Well, people get vaccinated and wear masks. Yeah, probably.
We could do it on Monday afternoon. It's not going to be a full meeting. It's only going to be one agenda item, John. So we could almost do it anytime as long as we have, 72 hours notice, John, Scott?
Yes, there's that component. And then the other component is just how all the pieces are moving through, and then having the time to create the staff report and then respond to likely lots of questions that take multiple hours from staff and Carollo's team to respond to. So you have to factor all those pieces in as well.
Well, does the rest of the committee think it makes sense for us to have a look at this before it goes to the city council? I mean, we got some people that have been very involved with cash management professionally and might add some value. Right, Lois?
I agree. But I mean, the city's driving it, so I mean, the city has to fit it within their gathering all the information and having it go to city council. There may not be enough time for us to look at it.
I think that's the point, Homer. Is we're not saying no. It's just I don't have enough information to tell you when and what point it would be useful, and then how that presents itself on the timeline that would maybe hasten pretty quickly. So that's just our way of saying I don't know. But that's something we certainly could relate back to the chair to see if we could fit that in. But it also has to be amongst all the other things we're working on.
Okay, yeah, so I would just say, okay, go ahead, Lois. Sorry.
I was just going to say, they're professionals. I trust that they will, if they have questions, if they want to discuss it, they can reach out, right? And they have advisors. They can reach out to us individually. So that's my comment.
Yeah, that's true, except that the city council did specifically assign to this committee to review the cash flow issues regarding the construction of this asset in the loans and all that kind of thing. So it does seem like this is something that would fall within that assignment.
Yeah, we'll see. Sarah and I will talk again. Not to say no, and that's a good reminder. I think when the cash flow was being discussed, I think it was more oriented to the that positive state where there would be sort of a surplus and a determination to be made whether that could be used to pay down rates or to accelerate the capital improvement project plan or for other uses. Certainly in a different position now because of how long SRF has taken to process the loan agreement. So it's something we need to discuss internally, and then we'll just get back to the chair on that.
Okay, thank you. But just for everybody to be aware, maybe there will be a special meeting sometime in October if you're looking at the first November city council meeting.
Or it could be sooner depending on when it's needed, John. Just want to make that clear.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So is there a motion to receive this report?
I move that we receive the WRF report for the quarterly report.
And I'll second it.
Do we have a second? Was that Lois?
Yeah, I'm sorry, my phone hiccuped. Yes, I'll second it.
Okay, Lois, thank you. Sarah?
Well, roll call vote. Committee Member Alexander?
Yes.
Committee Member Beckman?
Yes.
Committee Member Johnson?
Yes.
And Committee Member Peck is absent. Committee Member Weiner?
Yes.
Vice Chair Spagnola?
Yes.
And Chair Martin?
Yes. So the next item is future agenda items. Sarah, what do we have on tap?
So for your November meeting, we have, I'm going off of the calendar that was in your April report. So it would be the quarterly WRF report, and that would be quarter one of fiscal year 21-22. Also the quarterly investment report as well for quarter one of fiscal year 21-22. And then possibly the quarterly budget performance report as well. And then there may be, I think as Chair Martin mentioned, council compensation review if that timing works well and if we need CFAC's input on that. So that would be four items for that November meeting so far.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. That sounds like plenty, but okay, so our next meeting is going to be November 16th, 2021, 3 p.m. by Zoom, unless notified otherwise. And are there any last minute comments? Okay, seeing.
Hey, John.
Oh, yeah, Barbara?
Oh, hey, I have something real quick. September 14th is the recall election. My group will be at Vets Hall. We will be managing that facility. So I just encourage everybody to vote by mail or between the hours of 7 and 8 p.m. There will not be voting service centers open this year. You just have to drop it off, mail it in, or come in person. And Scott, I'll reach out to one of your people for access to the facility and coordination with the setup the day before Monday, the 13th.
Thank you, Barbara.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, so the time is 5:18 and we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.